Hi, I'm Peter Tofano, and welcome to this episode of Leadership in Extraordinary Times. We at Oxford Said started this series when COVID-19 hit. What began as a public health crisis has blossomed into an economic, social, political, and environmental calamity. Our emphasis has always been on how we can build forward. To move forward, however, it's going to take bold thinking and bold action. We need the bold ones, hence the title of today's episode. And our guest today, Linda Rottenberg, emboldens the boldest. So she's the co-founder and CEO of Endeavour Global. She's been called the innovator for the 21st century, the entrepreneur whisperer. Her book, confidently, she says confidently, people told us we were crazy. We took it as a compliment. Her book, Crazy as a Compliment, The Power of Zigging When Everybody Else is Zagging, encapsulates her approach. And it'll take this level of innovation and craziness to boldly power us into the future. Linda saw early on that entrepreneurship is just not a Silicon Valley game, but a global phenomenon. And Endeavour has offices across the globe and works with high-impact entrepreneurs in over 35 countries and underserved U.S. cities. Linda's also one of the friends of Oxford Said. She's one of the advisors of the Pershing Square Fellows Program, which was funded by the Pershing Square Foundation and Bill Ackman, which helps train the next generation of leaders. In conversation today with Linda will be my colleague, Professor Pinar Ozcan, who is the professor of entrepreneurship and innovation at the school. She serves as the director of the Oxford program on finance and technology, fintech. Before coming to Oxford, she did a number of other things, but including at Stanford, she directed the AEA Stanford Executive Institute, the Stanford Entrepreneurship Thought Leadership Series, and more. And she's been breaking new ground in innovation broadly, but specifically in fintech and open banking. Well, enough from me. We've got an amazing conversation ahead with Linda and with Pinar. So over to you both, and thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Peter, and welcome, Linda. It is such a pleasure to meet you. I am a big fan, like many people who are on this call now. And I want to, first of all, thank you for being here and agreeing to talk with us about high-impact entrepreneurship. And I want to just start out by asking you to tell us how your journey in this way started.
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be with you, Pinar, and I am such a fan of what Peter Tofano has done at Oxford Said Business School. I just wish I could be with you in person. So hopefully at some point in the not too distant future. So my journey started, I guess, back in college when, speaking of Bill Ackman, Bill was one of my college friends, and he was watching Warren Buffett in the stock market, as were most of my friends, and I thought, I'm not sure that journey's for me. And then there was, LA Law was a very popular TV show, and I thought, I don't know, maybe I'll go to law school. So I went from Harvard to Yale Law School and thought, oh my God, I thought Yale Law School was just about, studying philosophy and political economy. I didn't realize people actually wanted to be lawyers or judges. So my professors took pity on me when I was the only one in my class that didn't have the Supreme Court clerkships and the political career mapped out. And they sent me down to Latin America. And what I realized over a series of years and projects, I did some work at Ashoka, Innovators for the Public, was that there was so much talent, but there were no entrepreneurs. And this is now the mid-1990s when Yahoo and Netscape are going public. Steve Jobs is coming back to Apple. And I couldn't understand why everyone is talking about microcredit and no one is talking about building the next Microsoft. And I started talking about entrepreneurs and quickly realized as I was in a taxi in Buenos Aires when the driver explained to me that though he had an engineering degree, there were no jobs outside the government. And when we tried to go back and forth, realized there wasn't even a word at that point in Spanish or Portuguese or Turkish or Arabic or Bahasa Indonesian or many others for entrepreneur. That was my aha moment. I thought, oh my God, my parents already think I'm crazy for going down to Latin America. But imagine if you can't even tell your parents what you're trying to do after school because there's not even a word. So that's when I got together with my co-founder, Peter Kellner. He was at Harvard Business School at the time, Dean Tofano's old haunting ground. And we said, look, let's try to create an organization that selects high impact entrepreneurs. By that, we mean the ones with the biggest ideas, the boldest, who also have the capability to scale the companies to a point where it really matters. They're creating jobs, they're creating, value, they're achieving, exits, and then have them pay it forward into the ecosystem by inspiring, mentoring, and investing in others. And the last thing I'll say, Pinar, before your next question about what happened is, yes, everyone called me Chica Loca, the crazy girl, throughout Latin America, because I would go around talking about these crazy young 20-something-year-olds with these, technological ideas, and people thought I was literally insane. And so I said, all right, if they're going to call me crazy, I'm going to own it. It's a compliment. And we started out, and today Endeavour operates in 20 countries. Just to give you a scale, we have now worked with over 2,000 entrepreneurs. They generate now close to $30 billion in annual revenue. They've created over 4 million jobs. And what we have at Endeavour is the ecosystem building nonprofit side of things. And then we have a $250 million co-investment fund that co-invests and provides capital to these entrepreneurs. So we can get into that. But today, there are words in every country. In fact, the editor of the Portuguese English dictionary from Brazil ended up calling us about 5 years in and said, in part because of Endeavour's work, they were adding the words empreendedor and empreendedorismo into the popular lexicon. They had been unused words. And so today, anyone out there who's starting, hopefully you can tell your parents in your language that you want to be an entrepreneur, and they'll think it's at least not a terrible idea.
That is amazing. And of course, as starting a new ecosystem in a place that is just so different and that has such a strong culture is never easy. Can you tell us a little bit what you did in the first place and what some of the initial challenges were?
Yeah. Well, let me take two ecosystem examples, and then just as a starting point, Argentina and then Turkey. Argentina was one of our first two offices, Argentina and Chile. And so in Argentina, this was after the military junta. There were many business people and young people who had left. And so we wanted a homegrown example. Someone had told me that Steve Jobs, while inspiring to me, was not inspiring to them because he started Apple in the famous garage, with Steve Wozniak. And they said, I don't even have a garage, Linda. Like, give me an example that's a little more accessible. And so we found one of our first entrepreneurs, who I was just talking to yesterday, was a kid named Wence, who'd grown up on a sheep farm in Patagonia. He'd created the first internet service provider and then sold it and was promptly kicked out the next day, getting nothing. But undeterred, he decided to start in 1997 the E-Trade of Latin America, called Patagon.com. 34 local investors turned him down. They had no idea what this was. E-Trade? Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, we felt he had something special. So we selected Wence as an Endeavour entrepreneur. We helped him raise his first round of capital from Fred Wilson, then of Flatiron Partners, today of Union Square Ventures, one of the top VCs in New York. It was his first investment in Latin America. We helped Wence find a COO. And then I always say he got the full service Endeavour because he ended up marrying my assistant, Belle. And 18 months later, Wence sold Patagon.com to Banco Santander for $750 million. All 34 investors called us up and said, you got another kid with a group with strange ideas. And today, all across Latin America, people will say, if Wence can do it, I can too. Today, by the way, he's known in Silicon Valley as Bitcoin Patient Zero. He sold Mark Zuckerberg his first Bitcoin. He sold Bill Gates his first Bitcoin. He now runs Zappo, which is a Bitcoin wallet. And after looking like an idiot, in his words, for a few years, starting the last week, he's looking like a genius again. He is always a genius, no matter what it is. So that's Wence's. One of the things that happened in this ripple effect, and we talk about high impact entrepreneurs as really force multipliers for ecosystem change. There were these two Stanford business school students, Marcus and Arnon, who were about to go do what Stanford Business School students did at that point, which is go to McKinsey, go to Goldman Sachs, maybe stay in the Valley and work for one of the companies there. And they heard Wence's story and they said, you know what, we're going to go back to Argentina. They ended up creating Mercado Libre. They said, we'll take the eBay model and bring it to Argentina. It became a combination of eBay, PayPal, and Alibaba. Today, as of a few weeks ago, Mercado Libre, which went public on the NASDAQ in 2008, became the first $100 billion company in Latin America, $100 billion. And today, Marcos is still CEO. He's vice chair of Endeavour Argentina. And he and Wence and these young engineers from Globant, who created a digital transformation company, are inspiring, mentoring, and investing in almost every new company that comes out. And I just had a female entrepreneur built a digital transformation company, invested in, mentored by the founders of Globant, just sold her company a few weeks ago to Accenture, and is now going to help to mentor women entrepreneurs. Let's move to Turkey, because it's a similar story. So we went to Turkey, and there were all of these big family businesses, but no one starting tech companies or digital enabled companies. And so one of the early founders we found there is a guy named Nevzat, who is creating the online delivery platform for EMEA. And he ended up selling. We invested in him. We supported him with his leadership issues. And he ended up selling to Delivery Hero for close to $600 million. Again, it was the largest internet exit at the time. But what he did was really remarkable, because in a place like Turkey, there were no employee stock option plans. So there was no way to get equity. And in fact, no one wanted equity because they thought it was a way to take away their cash. They didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. So what Nevzat did is he kept a ledger of what every employee, would have earned in equity. Wow. Took $27 million, which was about a quarter of his own of his personal returns, and post exit gave that to the entrepreneurs. To the employees. Scroll to last July, when Sidar, a wonderfully, innovative gamer, I'm doing this because he has this handlebar mustache, and he created one of the top gaming companies that was bought by Zynga for $1.8 billion last year. And he's done the same. Not only did he take his earnings and give it to the employees, again, no stock option plans, but they're now creating a system where their de facto is, because this ecosystem is built and they believe they have to pay it forward. But he just mentored a young husband and wife team from Ankara who are creating a hyper casual game. They're in Ankara, the capital city. There's not much going on. It's a husband-wife duo, and now the Peak Games senior management team has taken them under their wings and is mentoring them so they can also create a global company out of Turkey. So I think what you're seeing, and I'll end here, but what happens is, if you have just a few successful companies, there was a time in India where all people talked about was Wipro, Infosys, and Tata, nothing else. Mm-hmm. Because the founders never went and mentored the next generation. They never went and became founder to funder, the PayPal mafia, right? So one of the things we're trying to do at Endeavour, and Reid Hoffman is a board member, and I joke that we're trying to internationalize the PayPal mafia. And he never likes the word mafia. He's always like, PayPal network. I was like, come on, own the mafia. But really what you're seeing is that it creates this flywheel effect. And so now what we're trying to do is take these ecosystems in Nigeria, in Indonesia, in Mexico, in Romania, in all pockets of the world, and say it can happen here too.
Wonderful. Before I ask more questions, I want to remind our audience that you can participate, you can ask questions. So whatever channel, whatever platform you're on, please post your brief questions with your name and where you're from, and then we will try our best to ask them here. I'm getting a question feed here. So Linda, when you're building these ecosystems, it seems like a very important element is that there's a lot of giving back. When you support an entrepreneur, they become part of a network and they start to give back to the network. Can you tell us how it functions?
Sure. I'd say we have a few core values that are really critical to how we operate, especially as we have this hybrid model, right? With the for-profit funds and the nonprofit ecosystem building network, having values that align the missions of both is critical. So 3 that I'll mention here are, 1, we're entrepreneur first. We are an organization of, by, and for entrepreneurs. This is critical because at times, there are conflicts between and among entrepreneurs and their investors, entrepreneurs and their, co-founders, entrepreneurs and their board members. And we always focus on the entrepreneur first. And that is unique. And in turn, many of our entrepreneurs end up joining the boards of Endeavour. I'll get back to that in a minute. There's a good recent story there. The second is this network of trust. We won't sign non-disclosure agreements. We think that's one of the problems that Route 128 in Boston had, is they had all these non-competes and non-disclosure agreements versus Silicon Valley. It was like, oh, you're leaving? What's your next venture? I'll fund you. So we feel it's our responsibility to have, but you have to have trust then. And if people violate the trust, they have to be, excised from the network. But we've done that. And then the other thing is this pay it forward spirit. And what we've said is we're investing in very few people to have that force multiplier effect. So in fact, of the 250 million we've raised, about a quarter of it to a third of it is from Endeavour entrepreneurs themselves. And the others, it's entrepreneurs like Steve Case of AOL and Michael Dell and Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn and Pierre Omidyar of eBay. And so it's this sense that we are of, by, and for entrepreneurs, and it's their responsibility as entrepreneurs to spend time mentoring, to spend time reinvesting, to become those founder to funders. That actually is how Silicon Valley was started. If you go back to even the Shockley lab and the Trader Estate, it's people reinvesting. And that's what we've said. You can't build strong businesses in weak ecosystems. You can to a point, and that's what's been amazing. And so just two examples of how this is operating. One is Guillaume of checkout.com. Guillaume is a Swiss national, but has built this incredible fintech company in Dubai and London. He and his family is based in Dubai. It's now really one of the top 4 fintech in platforms in the world. And he came to Endeavour before he had raised his Series A, but he had bootstrapped the company to $100 million, and now thought, oh, maybe if I want to take on Stripe and Adyen, maybe I should actually get some investors. And we helped him raise his Series A. His Series A was at a $2 billion valuation. It was the 3rd largest fintech raised in history. And recently, less than 18 months later, he had a Series C valuing him at $15 billion, becoming Europe's highest valued fintech company. And before this announcement was made, and it was a big deal in all of the, the press, Guillaume held the story until Endeavour's website reflected that he had joined the Endeavour UAE board. This was so personally meaningful to him. He's an investor in Catalyst. He spends countless hours mentoring. But I think that what's important about this philosophy we have is that at the end of the day, I've told entrepreneurs that my expectation is that boards will be entirely run by entrepreneurs, that we will be completely funded by the success of the entrepreneurs. So all of the returns Endeavour gets from the funds go to support the nonprofit side. And I thought, what a statement if in the next 5 to 10 years, we are fully funded by the success of the very entrepreneurs we're there to support. And then we'll go for the next generation, we'll go to harder places. So that is the philosophy. And everyone who joins this community, this movement is infused with that same spirit.
That's fantastic. And what you're building really is a global platform, but at the same time, you need to have very strong local support for these entrepreneurs to move forward. How do you balance the two? What is the local versus global force for you?
Yeah, it used to be local versus global. We went through that process. Now we have a #OneEndeavour logo. Let's all work together. But in seriousness, it's actually gotten easier for the following reasons. Mm-hmm. Look, we have wonderful local boards that we operate with boards in every country, and the boards are usually the top business leaders. Sometimes if there's top venture investors, they'll join. Sometimes if there's been a successful entrepreneur, for example, we just launched in Romania. So a key board member there is the CTO and co-founder of UiPath, which is one of the most important companies also in Europe, based out of Romania. But it's rare. But if we're going in before there are these, tech-enabled or tech-centric exits, we're building the ecosystem as we go. So we start with these top highly networked family business owners and self-made, entrepreneurs. And over time, as I said, the entrepreneurs join these boards. But what is really interesting is it's very rare if you are coming out of Brazil or Mexico a few years ago, or even now Indonesia or Vietnam or Bulgaria or Greece or Saudi or Dubai, that there are examples of people who've built technology and tech-enabled companies to scale. So yes, there are a lot of large businesses, but there are very few of these unicorns and decacorns where people have scaled tech businesses from 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 employees, where they've gone through, raising Series A, Series B, Series C rounds. When they thought about exits, today we get a lot of questions about SPACs. I'm actually on the board of one of Reid Hoffman's SPACs, and so we are, through our global verticals, and we have an outliers group, which are the top performing Endeavour entrepreneurs, giving this peer-to-peer network that is unparalleled in the world. Because there's one thing to open new markets and want access to the people who have those local connections, but it's an entirely other thing in a trust-based kind of YPO-like forum. We have these Endeavour peer-to-peer forums where somebody has been through the same thing, which is, how do you attract engineers in Nigeria, to your platform? How do you scale as an entrepreneur to a CEO? How do you deal with issues of raising capital and challenges with co-founders? And Endeavour is really there in that peer-to-peer entrepreneur first spirit. So that's what we've tried to build. So it naturally, the entrepreneurs want the local market connections, and yet they want access to the top, global peers who've built successful businesses before.
Absolutely. And of course, with any platform, building the users and the providers and making sure that there's demand and supply at the same time. And in your case, of course, the entrepreneurs on one side and the support group on the other side, that's never easy because they need to be there at the same time in order to match. Now, moving forward, obviously, you have gone to many countries, and you also have, interestingly, some examples of cities in developed countries. So there was a bit of let's say, widening of the scope, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
There was. I was against this first, but actually, it started actually in Greece. And a college friend of mine, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who then was a venture capitalist, now is Prime Minister of Greece. And Greece is actually one of the fortunate ones to have competent leadership. And Kyriakos and his wife Mareva came and said, "Look, Greece needs this," and I was concerned. I thought this will open the floodgates, which it did, to Italy, to Spain. I would say in Europe, Endeavour's been hugely successful, and it's actually been very hard to build successful companies in places like Italy and Spain and Greece before Endeavour was there. And I'm super proud of the network we've built and of the entrepreneurs who really are now, creating this spirit of possibility. And we've seen a number of exits coming out of these, and the first unicorns in Spain, and soonicorns, as someone said, in Italy and Greece. We did go to the US, which was a little bit of a controversial play. But interestingly, it was really only Endeavour and Steve Case's Rise of the Rest that 5-10 years ago thought it was possible to build companies in the US outside Silicon Valley. And it was really the arrogance of the venture capitalists who said, "Oh, we'll invest in you if you're in Miami or Detroit or Atlanta or Louisville, but you have to move here." And we said, "That's ridiculous. What are you talking about?" So now it seems obvious, and post-COVID, everyone, there's a billboard from the mayor of Miami and San Francisco saying, "If you're planning to move to Miami, DM me." That's a billboard in San Francisco. So now it seems obvious. I'd say at this point in the U.S., we're looking a lot at underserved founders. It's still very difficult if you're a female founder, if you're a Black or other minority founder to access venture capital. So we're focusing on that. But I think also what's so interesting is the interplay between these entrepreneurs that are even coming from Europe and outside Silicon Valley in New York and the US and the emerging markets, where it's actually kind of similar to try to attract talent to your city and to build companies where it's really not been done before.
Sounds great. And in fact, I mean, when the ecosystem is weak, it doesn't matter where you are. It's the same process in a sense.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, and this is very interesting in terms of COVID, at a country level, I was blown away by the fact that Endeavour entrepreneurs not only grew, right? We know that that the world of going digital was enhanced. And so all of these tech-enabled companies obviously are going to do well. We had more investments in Catalyst last year than ever. We had more exits in the last year than ever. But what makes me so proud is the way entrepreneurs reacted and said, and this is different than in the US, they said, if our country is hurting, we've got to provide the solutions. So just 3 quick examples. Al-Tibi in Jordan, the WebMD of Jordan, became the national health line about COVID, okay, for the entire country. You had a 3D printing company in Italy that changed production. It was doing, hardware and ended up providing the PPE. And in Nigeria, one of the probably what will be the first unicorn in Nigeria, a company called Flutterwave, founded by this ex-PayPaler GB, wonderful guy. And he is building the largest B2B payment infrastructure for small businesses. But what he realized is that he couldn't just be the payment infrastructure, the Stripe of Africa. He needed actually to help businesses keep their lights on, because suddenly they were losing all their foot traffic and did not have any storefront. So what he did is pivoted his model from just being B2B to actually helping these 20,000 businesses keep the lights on. That was the mantra. And they processed over $7.5 billion last year in the revenue and they had 80 million transactions. And he really saved small businesses in Nigeria. So I think that is why, for me, working at the country level in these emerging and growth markets is super exciting, because you see just the ecosystem impact that goes beyond just the entrepreneur and technology infrastructure to, when a crisis happens, how do people make an impact at a national level?
Fantastic. And from our audience, we have a question. This is Peter from New York, and he was in fact wondering about how the pandemic has affected both the supply of entrepreneurs, and I'll add a question to that actually, and say also the supply of investment.
Well, it's interesting. Exactly a year ago, I was coming back from Saudi Arabia, my last trip, and when we shut down, we immediately started an Endeavour webinar series called Leading Through Crisis. And we were the lone optimists at that point. And I'd say at that point, all the VCs said, hoard your money, don't spend a dime, you're never raising again. And we thought, you're insane. This is like the best moment to be an entrepreneur. And I reminded everyone, my mantra, apart from the crazy as a compliment, my other mantra is that when economies turn down, entrepreneurs turn up. And that is, of course, what happened. And what we saw is that tech-enabled solutions really were more needed than ever. So we would have, digital transformation companies skyrocketing, ed tech platforms, health tech platforms. Imagine, what would have happened pre-Zoom. I mean, just everyone was finding solutions. We had coffee shops opening in Indonesia with tech-enabled solutions. We had, as I mentioned, with Flutterwave, in every country, people finding fintech options to actually create opportunities for lots of mom and pop shops to build digital storefronts. And now, guess what? Those digital storefronts are thriving. I'm on a board of a company called Olo here, based in New York, that's doing a SaaS-based platform for digital ordering. Well, the trends were already going away from in-person eating in restaurants to digital. And now if you're a restaurant, you've just had to create that digital storefront, or maybe used a cloud kitchen. So what I would say is, The best time to be an entrepreneur is not when things are going great, because then the less agile companies can just, get all the talent. It's when things are troubled and when there is chaos. Chaos is the friend of the entrepreneur, because that's when, if you're a big non-agile firm, you're retrenching, and the agile companies are the ones that can fly. So just to end here, we invested through Endeavour Capital. We raised our largest Catalyst fund last year. 134 million of the $250 million. We were targeting less than that. We made 34 investments, I believe, our most that we'd ever had, in a diversified platform. We've had more exits happening. So I actually think that what is going on is the speeding up of the entrepreneurial revolutions we were seeing for the last 5 and 10 years. And that is not going to stop, because I think that we are just at the beginning of ag tech and ed tech and health tech, and solving these pain points through technology. It's no longer just about social networks. We had seen this for many, many years, but I think Silicon Valley and the VCs are now finally realizing there is growth opportunities in actually solving these real pain points.
Absolutely. And as the pandemic forces us and forces companies to become digital, there's just so much opportunity for tech entrepreneurs to disrupt those who are staying behind, in fact. That's absolutely.
And even the non-tech entrepreneurs have to have a tech component. So even the F&B companies we're seeing, even the retail businesses, know they have to have a tech-enabled component to grow. So there's no longer a difference between the tech companies, which used to be hardware and software and engineers, and the non-tech companies. That distinction has gone away, my friends. Like, everything has to be tech-enabled, or you're not going to move forward.
In fact, and it seems that in your portfolio, there is a great emphasis, or at least historically, there was an emphasis on tech entrepreneurship, but there's also quite a bit of non-tech in there as well. Can you tell us about that balance? And of course, that has changed over time, as you say.
Yeah, it's interesting, because one of the things I sometimes stoke a little bit of controversy, because and for me, high impact has always been about high growth. As I said, it's about high growth plus paying it forward, right? But the impact investment world that took hold, people wanted to lump Endeavour in with, and I rejected that. I said no, because people who were calling impact investing were the quote traditional VCs who thought, oh, all of this cute little healthcare and education and ag, investments, they're kind of on the margins. I guess they used to be social, and now maybe there's a business there, but we're going to stick with, the new apps and the new software plays, and we're in the new SaaS companies. And we said, look, we're going to do both, but you guys are missing the point. And when you look outside of the US, you have to solve problems. And so, as I said, if you're a B2B fintech company, but your merchants don't have, access to credit, or don't have access to their customers, you're solving that problem. And what we saw is, to leapfrog many of the infrastructure problems in healthcare, we saw a lot of health delivery systems because there were just not efficient platforms, whether it was emergency rooms that didn't have technology to make decisions on time, or we now have healthcare like trucks coming into places in the cities that didn't have access to vaccinations, which is obviously becoming very important. Or ed tech platforms in populations where you just didn't have the internet access. How do you deal with that? How do you do it over mobile, right? And the world had gone to mobile, as we know, much earlier than the US. Facebook was famously lagging in mobile. Nigeria and Brazil and Indonesia were much further ahead with mobile, and Turkey than the US. So what we saw is, just early on, the real entrepreneurs don't just build PowerPoints, they solve pain points. And I think that the US VCs are late to the game, but now realizing that actually health tech, ag tech, ed tech, these tech-enabled big problem scaling solutions are really where the growth is going to come. So what I would say is, there's not really been a distinction in the last years. If we have one of our top female entrepreneurs, a woman named Veronica, who grew up in the north of Spain, this town called Burfos. And she actually left this family business. It was a manufacturing business, and she didn't want to take it over. And she went to Paris, and and got her aeronautical engineering degree in Spain. Then went to Paris, but was called back as the family business was shrinking and needed help. And she realized this opportunity to take from this, as I said, this town, and turned it into an AI robotics manufacturing company. Her clients are Tesla and Apple, right? And so I think that what we've seen is, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's agriculture, the new generation is saying, let's blend these tech scaling solutions. And this is true in F&B as well. Every food and beverage company in Endeavour now has a tech platform. And I think that that's what we're realizing, is that if you see a distinction, then you're missing the beauty of solving big problems, but using the scaling capabilities of technology.
Fantastic. Before I move on, I want to welcome our new listeners. I'm Pinar Ozcan, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Said Business School, and I'm speaking with the wonderful Linda Rottenberg, who is the CEO of Endeavour Global and founder, of course. I want to next touch upon a question that is quite popular in our chat, and specifically it is about what qualities you're looking for in an entrepreneur. At Oxford, at CDL, for example, we see a lot of very interesting ventures coming in, but even the ones with greatest ideas sometimes don't go forward, and sometimes it has to do with the qualities of the entrepreneur. So what makes an entrepreneur go forward and skyrocket?
You know, we focus at Endeavour on the scale-ups, not the startups. And I think that what's interesting about that is there are different sets of challenges at the scale-up phase. Often, I always say, if you're starting with co-founders, even if they're your best friends or your sister or brother, get a startup prenup, because what happens is everyone's like, oh, we'll all split the equity equally. We'll all be co-CEOs and make the decisions. That sounds great at the beginning. And then 5 years in, when one person is really working day and night and the other person is, decided they actually want to do something part-time somewhere else, or someone else really can't scale into the CFO for a fast-growing company, and yet you're stuck with this structure, you need a way to deal with with situations as scenarios change. So a lot of times what we're doing is helping people, restructure their original equity and partnership agreements. So that's just something to keep in mind for those of you starting out. But to answer your question, Pinar, I always look for why this entrepreneur solving this problem. Because what I found, if it's just opportunistic, if it's just people who've reverse engineered, okay, you know what, today Clubhouse is popular, so I'm going to create the Clubhouse for pets. I don't know, right? Or we're going to do, I don't know, just if it's a reverse engineered opportunity, when things get hard, and they will get hard, what's going to make you stick with it? Whereas when there's a real reason why this entrepreneur is starting this particular company, I always look for that. And a recent example that's not an Endeavour company, but recently in the news, is the story of Bumble, right? And the founder of Bumble, famously, a woman, had been part of the triumvirate that started Tinder, and got basically canceled from that company because she was in a bad relationship with one of her co-founders. And of course, the woman is the one who had to leave. And she realized there were a lot of challenges with dating apps because the men were in control. And so her premise behind Bumble is that the women are actually going to be in control. And she came, and it was very unclear at the time when she started that she, who had been literally canceled from Tinder, which was at that point one of the most successful companies, was going to be able to start this female-led dating app. Well, Bumble, of course, just went public. It's valued, I think, at about $9.5 billion as of today. And she's the youngest self-made, billionaire female and women entrepreneur. And so I think that story, what I like about it is there's a reason why she founded this particular company. So that's what I would say to all of you. If there's some real pain point or some real opportunity that's come from your own life, the likelihood that you're going to feel the need to keep going when times get tough is more likely. And so that's what I look like. It's when everything's going well, when people are, getting thrown venture capital, that's the easy point. At some point, it is going to get difficult. And I want to know what's going to make this founder stick with this idea. And if there's something in the DNA of the entrepreneur and the idea itself that will make them, feel compelled to keep going, then I'm going to back that founder.
Amazing. And you talked about scalability and how important that is. And one of the things that we see in our research at Oxford is that sometimes, especially if the startup needs early partners, early buyers to work with, let's say an AI startup, they are in need of data, and then they start to work with these early firms, and then they end up just becoming a consulting business and not being able to scale up with a product that applies to general masses. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways in which you evaluate scalability?
Yeah, I'd say there are two issues there. I thought you were going somewhere else, which is I always joke that the day we have clean cap tables and nice cap tables with the entrepreneurs and the employees being properly incented is the day I can go home and declare my job done, because it is unfortunately not going to happen in my lifetime. And I think people too early, try to get capital and on terrible terms. So I would say the more you can grow organically, the better, and not get diluted too early. But to your point, let me tell a story that's actually back in Argentina. It's actually a company that I'm now on the board of, and has been an Endeavour company for a while. And it was a company called Globant that was founded by 4 engineers who were basically realizing that businesses were in need of digital transformation. They saw this very early in 2003, but basically, Globant, which later went public on the New York Stock Exchange in 2014, was a kind of digital consultancy, to your point. And they take clients and some of the biggest firms, in the world, but they were doing, some back-end digital transformation, and they were doing whatever the companies needed, including some cool things like Disney had Globant work on the magic bands when you went back when we could actually travel to Disney World. They would give you the magic band where everything, Goofy would pop up because you'd said you like Goofy, and that was all Globant. But what they realized is, okay, how do we move from having a few clients where we're at the beck and call, but once, to your point, Pinar, once you get the data, then you have the ability to sell what you're doing for new companies. And I think to constantly reimagine, reinvent, and recommunicate what value you're providing to your clients it enables you to transform. One other example, again, of a company I'm on the board of, and today Globant is a $9 billion firm and growing, and taking on Accenture and Wipro and Infosys and saying, hey, the way consulting has been done is completely wrong. We're going to do digital transformation at scale. But another company, Olo. So Olo, was founded by someone who used to work for me, Noah Glass, was really looking at how you create opportunities for the top restaurants to have connections, digital connections, to be able to allow online ordering. Okay, this is what started 15 years ago. And what happened is, over time, and Noah realized, as he was doing these back-end platforms for 50% of the public restaurants, right, with all of the franchises, and think, Applebee's and Subway and all these big firms, he said, I have the data, exactly what you mentioned, Pinar. And he said, but I'm going to give them the data. Unlike Uber or DoorDash that's going to keep the data, they want to work with me. And so what he did is transform Olo into the leading software as a service, SaaS-based platform for restaurants. Why? Because he convinced them that not only could he help them get access to these customers and help with the digital side of food delivery, but he would give them access to their data, and that he was on their side. So I think the way you use data is very important, and being able to communicate that you're on the side of whatever client or customer, whether you're direct to consumer and you want the consumers to keep their data, which people are very cognizant of now, or whether it's your B2B and you're giving the customers, the businesses, the access to their consumer data and all the analytics. I think these are huge tools for the next generation of companies. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Absolutely. And as you say, data is power across industries now. And that leads me to my next question of how you see entrepreneurship evolving in an age where we are facing extreme power by platforms.
Well, it's interesting. When you look at the Fortune 500 companies, the topple rate of companies, meaning the way they topple off the list and are displaced by the next generation, is actually much faster than you would imagine. And I think there was a point 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm sure it's true today, where over half of the companies on that fastest growing company list were founded in periods of downturn, recession, or outright crisis. And I think that's what we're going to see. And it's just the names change. So I think now people are worried about the big four, the big five having too much power. But, remember, IBM was in that situation way back when. So I think that if Google and if, Microsoft and Apple and Facebook and Alibaba aren't careful, they're going to be, disrupted themselves. And even, look at what Facebook did. It tried to buy up all of the competitors, right? It bought up Instagram, it bought up WhatsApp. So what's happening? So then you have Snap and you have Clubhouse and you have all of these, and you have Signal, and you have all of these other now competitors coming. So I believe in competition. I believe in agility. I think it's really hard, even for the storied companies that started out as the most dynamic. At some point, they too become the old behemoths, And you look at Amazon, look at now what Spotify is doing. And Spotify said, hey, we're going to be on the side of the business customer. We're the B2B savior, clients. Amazon only cares about the end users. We care about you, the businesses. So Spotify is taking on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big believer. Disruption is possible. It's always a good time to be an entrepreneur. Don't worry about the entrenched leaders. Just do your thing in the most, agile, high scale way, and move forward.
In fact, and one of the ways in which we see entrepreneurs move forward now is that they see some of these platforms as potential partners that they can work with. For example, there's a certain service that these platforms are missing, but the platform actually has the data that can help the entrepreneur, as you said earlier, in order to create a win-win situation, right?
Yeah, I'm very cautious though when it comes to strategics making investments though, because what you don't want to do is feel like there's the feed the fish thing, that they're feeding you the fish only to fatten you up to eat you. So I would just be careful of what a partnership means. Yes, for good platforms, but maintain your independence. Always look over your shoulder and make sure, it's not the other story is of the porcupine that, I forgot the other animal that's going across, and the porcupine promises to take care of them. And then midway through, it stings them, and as the other animal's dying, he said, but you promised. He said, I know, but it's in my nature. I can't help myself. Remember, it's in the nature of Google and Facebook and Amazon to want to eat you. So just go in with that mindset.
Fantastic. So we have another question here from Matthew Lizotte, and he's thinking about service businesses and how they can scale up their technology and digital transformation.
100%. I look, as I said, Globant, when it was starting, I mentioned this company, and they're like, there's no scalability. What are you talking about? This is a consultancy. This is all based on people. Guess what? They've figured out a way to do business hacking and pods and built this incredible culture and have scaled people. What I would say is culture becomes really, really important in these service-based industries. I think two things, culture and communication. As I said, on the communication side, making sure customers really understand the value that you are delivering. Back to that, hey, we have data, we're going to give it to you, and we're going to show you the improvements. I think the more you can show them the cost savings, the efficiency savings, you have to over communicate so they don't take you for granted. That's beat one. Beat two, so they see you as a partner and not just a service provider. Who wants to be a service provider? You want to be a partner and go in not transaction-based, but relationship-based. And make sure you are focusing on the culture of your people, because service-based businesses depend a lot on scaling your teams. And I think that if you have a healthy culture, and now as we look remote, it becomes much more important when people are, needing that emotional support. How do you do that? Those are the companies that are going to win. I think when you have software or hardware products, you can just focus on the product development and the quality of the product. If you're in the service, focus on those people. So focus on the people and culture, and focus on communicating your value to your customers, and you'll be great.
Fantastic. Now, thinking about corporations, how can they be part of your ecosystem? Are they completely excluded?
They're not. First of all, we have a lot of, ex-Amazon, ex-IBM, ex-Google, ex-Apple folks who end up joining and want to, recapture their old entrepreneurial startup spirit, scale-up spirit. But no, we do partner with organizations, a lot of them. We just explained that we're entrepreneur first. So I think that they have to listen. It's not that they say, okay, we are, corporate X and we have these services or these products to deliver to your entrepreneurs. We say, look, we're going to poll the entrepreneurs and they'll tell you what's interesting, to them. So I think that's, I think there are a lot of companies that want that almost entrepreneur in residence type spirit. And so Endeavour, entrepreneurs are actually providing that. Sometimes it backfires though. We had a partnership with Ernst & Young, we still do, but we had this part of the partnership where they would take, top high performing up and coming managers and embed them for a sabbatical with Endeavour entrepreneurs around the world. And then they told me the program had worked too well that a number of those managers came back and then quit their jobs to go work full time with the entrepreneurs. And they're like, okay, we love Endeavour, but that program is canceled. So we said, okay, we have to do it in a way that is entrepreneur first, entrepreneur aligned, but realizes that part of what the company wants to do is attract and retain their own people. And I will say, by the way, we have an amazing partnership with Bain, and Bain has been instrumental in Endeavour really building our own, 5-year strategic plans and analyzing our own, data to see what makes for great entrepreneurs. What do we know about choosing the right ones, and also helping our entrepreneurs themselves. So that's been a tremendous partnership. I would say if you are a corporate, just make sure you're going out thinking about what's of value to the entrepreneur and not only, what's of value to you. But there's a role for everyone in the ecosystem.
Fantastic. Great. We have a question from Vietnam. And the question is, how does the platform deal with the difference in working culture in local versus foreign entrepreneurs?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And let me say, I love Vietnam and we have an office there. I've spent wonderful time in Saigon and Ho Chi Minh City and can't wait to get back. Look, let me give you 2 examples of Endeavour entrepreneurs from Vietnam. One is a guy named Max, grew up super poor, and didn't speak English, a word of English. And what he realized is he wanted to create the payments platform, let's say the Stripe, of Vietnam and eventually Southeast Asia. But the way you had to do it, there's so little trust, and you had to go into these really, really poor neighborhoods and communities, which he came from. And it was kiosk to kiosk. We saw this too with Bukalapak, one of our companies in Indonesia. Same thing with Zaki and Fadrine, the founders. They went, hyper local, right? And this guy has built this network and built one of the killer payment platforms now in Vietnam. He's actually being mentored by a Guillaume of Checkout, back to checkout.com, and Guillaume paying it forward. He was on the selection panel and has now become a mentor to Max. And Max taught himself English and is creating this platform that, even though it started in Vietnam, he wants the best practices from around the world, right? And he's like, I want global best practices, and then I'm going to custom tailor it to Vietnam and then the Philippines and then Malaysia, which are the cultures that I understand, which is fantastic. But to your point, one of my favorite new Endeavour entrepreneurs is a woman named Vu Van, and she is an engineer from Vietnam. And she ended up going to a Stanford Business School and realizing that because of her accent, she wasn't getting called on or being taken seriously by her professors and her classmates. So she paid to get an English tutor. And then she realized, well, there are all these other people who had the same problems. It was slightly different accent issues if they were from Japan or India or Brazil, but they also had their same problems. And she wanted to create a platform where if you couldn't afford the, $200 an hour English tutor, or $100 an hour, what could you do? She wanted to democratize that access. So she teamed up with one of the ex-AI experts from Google and has created this AI-based platform. It's called Elsa, that does its voice recognition technology that, depending on what your accent is, helps you learn English. So here is this Vietnamese woman that's now created. It just raised a Series B we participated in with some of the top investors in Southeast Asia and in Silicon Valley, and super scaling business. But it was, to your point, it was solving this challenge of how do you take someone from places like Vietnam and Brazil and help them communicate where, at least for now, the global business language is English, but to retain the hyper local knowledge they have. So that's really what we're trying to do at Endeavour, is marry, back to Pinar's original question, that local experience with global peer-to-peer knowledge.
Fantastic.
Great question. Love Vietnam.
Exactly. We have only a few minutes, and just as it is in our title, I also want to ask you about leadership. So you are leading a multinational mission-driven organization, and I'm sure that it's both very exciting but also challenging. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges? What did you learn in this process?
Yeah, great question. So let me start by sharing part of the story that I like to share, because it's really, my husband is a writer and writes about life quakes. And this was one of my life quakes. And it involved him. He's a writer. He, 15-time, New York Times bestselling author, wrote a lot about walking in the Middle East and walking the Bible. And then he wrote, now he writes about sort of life quakes and different and work quakes and those challenges. But in 2008, he was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer, osteosarcoma, that only affects 100 adults a year. The survival rate was not great. And we have our twins, who are now almost 16, zooming in school right above me. They were 3 at the time. And I thought, oh my God, I'm running this organization. We had just received $10 million of investment by the Omidjar network to scale at that point beyond Latin America and Turkey and South Africa, to scale to 25 countries. We were 10 at the time. As I said, now we're 40. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I said, look, I've got to go to every chemo appointment of Bruce. He had a 16-hour surgery to replace his whole femur. And I said, that's my priority in taking care of my girls. And I just want to be honest. And of course, everyone stepped up, and you realize when you're a leader that everyone can do much more without you than you thought. But when I came back, here's the real kicker for me in the lesson. I thought, okay, I have to be tough. I have to be strong, especially as a woman. I'm not going to be, too vulnerable. It'll be cringy for people and it'll make them feel uncomfortable. I need to show just kind of strength. But when I was asked about Bruce was recovering and the girls, and it was just all a lot. And I kind of broke down. I was really embarrassed. And I thought, oh God, now no one's going to want to follow me. They're going to think I'm weak and not sort of trust my ability to lead them. And of course, the opposite happened. And I had these 2 young women at the time working for me who pulled me aside and said, you know what, Linda, we always thought you were superhuman. And that was super intimidating. And now that we see the more human, more vulnerable side of you, we'll follow you anywhere. And so I said to myself, oh my God, you're right. I was trying to be superhuman when really leaders have to be less super, more human. And I think we're seeing this now with Joe Biden, right? Really trying to just be a decent, human, empathic leader. And I think that male and female, that is the type of leadership that is more needed than ever, especially, and now I'll just quickly turn to what's happened in COVID, where I have 500 team members worldwide. 50 were in New York. And I'd always say I have a team of 500, not 50. Well, because of Zoom, because we're all actually remote, I actually meet with the full team much more often I did when we were siloed in our offices. I meet with boards and entrepreneurs all over the world. We have our selection panels now online. And so I'm able to communicate much more with a wider swath of people. It means I'm exhausted. So I think you have to replenish yourself and take care of yourself and realize if you're never taking a break, if you're never taking vacation, you think you're not showing it, you're showing it. So first I would say, take care of yourself, be less super, more human. But also today, people want that relatability. People are having their own struggles and seeing leaders who have that empathy while having that passion and that vision to move forward. If you can marry that, I think those are the types of leaders who are going to thrive ahead. It's no longer the militaristic, just at all costs, don't talk to me about personal issues and just don't talk about anything about work. I think those days are over. And this gets back to the last question about marrying cultures too. If you want to create a world-class company today and it's remote, you've got to be able to attract talent from anywhere, meaning you really have to be sensitive to different cultures and have that open spirit of dialogue and discussion. So it's an excellent question. I've never been more optimistic. And yet one of the things about Oxford Said Business School is you guys are global. It's one of the most global business schools, right? You're taught to think in an interdisciplinary way. I think it's incredible, and it's been incredible to meet the Pershing Square scholars over the last number of years. And I'm always impressed by how people are problem solving with these interdisciplinary techniques. Again, that's very different than other business schools. This is my Oxford Said plug right now. But I really feel like you guys are well positioned to have positions of leadership, because those skills and the empathy that I know is part and parcel of the strategy and leadership. I think you have all of these qualities that are in high demand. And I'm wishing all of you the best of luck, and stay in touch with me. And I'm on Twitter. I don't check LinkedIn as much as Reid Hoffman would like, but I occasionally check LinkedIn. And just proud to be part of this community.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's going to be the highlight of my month, I tell you. I learned so much, and thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your passion. And our learners, I'm sure, are just as thrilled as I am. So thank you so much for being with us. Now, before we conclude, I just want to let you guys know that the next time that we meet in Leadership in Extraordinary Times, it's going to be about the changing relationship of China and the West. And we have an amazing panel that includes people from the US and from Europe and, of course, from China. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for listening.